Welcome back. So our focus today is the state of South Africa's railway network. The business sector has been hit hard by the unreliable service, industrial action and the impact of floods, and it's dealing with huge losses. Last week's derailment on Transnet's coal line saw at least 60 wagons lost 6,000 tons of coal. Let's speak to Economist Professor Bonke Dumisa now, just to tell us, in terms of the losses. Professor, thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. Of course, already, I think PRASA at some point says it's lost about 7 billion rand in the last 2 years due to, the stealing of infrastructure and vandalism, etc. Is it a lack of will to actually protect this infrastructure? Are we expected as South Africans to just accept that there's people who vandalize and therefore this is the excuse that we must expect all the time?
I can comfortably say it's a lack of political will to deal with this whole issue of the vandalizing and sabotaging of the rail infrastructure. I mean, just last week, towards the end of last week, there was a derailment of a coal train, a Transnet coal train, carrying lots of coal. They are saying it is costing them at least 1 billion rands a day to try and sort the thing out. How can this thing happen? And I've said before that you have people who have built houses on top of railway tracks and no one arrests them and trains cannot move there. I mean, this is very serious. Railway tracks are taken very seriously all over the world. So why is it then that nothing is being done about these things? I mean, we had a situation where people in the Western Cape who built over railway tracks, and when they were supposed to be moved, it was said, well, Transnet had to settle with them and relocate them. So these are the things then that are affecting the effectiveness of Transnet and the railway system in South Africa. It is not just a question of the theft of overhead copper cables or the inefficiency of Transnet. It's a serious thing which needs a political will to resolve, because it involves the Department of Transport, it involves the police, because with some of the people who invade railway tracks, you have people who are councillors who actually supervise the people moving to those railway spaces.
Yeah. And Prof, I just want to give you the statistics of a press briefing that they in fact had a little earlier this year. I think it was around March, where they said Transnet, Telkom and Eskom put together have lost about 7 billion rand a year due to vandalism. PRASA alone being just over 1.2 billion rand. So how do we reconcile with this as South Africans to be given such excuses? Because obviously it means that to fix it will cost more money. And when you look at areas like Soweto, where there used to be train stations, it's a ghost of what it used to be. So it looks like nobody is actually willing to take any responsibility or even fix it.
That's why I'm saying there's lack of political will. I come from Umlazi. I always call myself an Ekasi boy, was Umlazi. There are no trains in Umlazi because the people have invaded the railway tracks between Reunion Station and Zoleto Station, and there's no will to remove them.
Fix that, yeah.
And that is where the problem is.
So, Prof, I'm sorry to interject. Do you think that we should actually take the route of the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, who had actually made it a crime to be able to sell some of the goods that people vandalize some of this infrastructure for?
I agree with that one. In fact, it's long overdue in South Africa, but do we have the political will to do that thing? Because you see in newspaper articles and on social media where they have got railway tracks at the so-called scrap yards, and those people are not arrested. They've got copper cable which can be traced back to the overhead cable, and no one is arresting them. And we hardly hear about cases of the so-called scrapyards of people being there. And unfortunately, some of them, I won't say the majority of them, are foreign nationals, not from Africa, but from Asia and elsewhere. And it looks like sometimes we are afraid to deal with them because we don't want to tamper with our foreign relations at the expense of South Africa.
And economically, Professor, just very quickly and lastly, the fact that they feel that we should celebrate the fact that they cut irregular expenditure from 3 million to 1.3 million. They shouldn't be irregular expenditure at all. But economically, how this affects us as a country, because eventually all these farmers who need the rails to work, etc., to be able to take their products from one country to the next will probably opt out of South Africa.
It is. It's not that it may happen. It is already happening. With everyone moving to the road networks, it is affecting the rail networks. But with all the trucks there being on the road networks, it is affecting those roads, and that's why we've got the potholes all over the place. And on the N2, where between Durban and Zululand, you have many places where people are saying kids have been run over by those trucks. They no longer want them, but the whole livelihoods of South Africans depend on those trucks. So if ever we were able to sort the railway networks, then there would be less congestion on the roads, and there would be safety for most South Africans.